Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, a Japanese-directed film made by Nagisa Oshima, which is partly in Japanese and partly in English, and also has actors from both sides. And also, interestingly enough, has two famous musicians playing the lead roles. One of them from the West, David Bowie, and one of them from the East, Ryuichi Sakamoto, who also composed the score for the film. On the surface, it's a war movie that depicts life of Allied soldiers in the Japanese prisoner of war camps during the Second World War, kind of similarly to the bridge on the River Kwai. But that's just the surface layer, and in reality, the film is something rather different. It's a slow, personal exploration of conflict, not in the external physical sense, but conflict of ideas, of values and morals, conflict of characters who embody them. In the opening scenes, we meet one of the three main characters, the titular Lawrence, played by Tom Conti. He's one of the prisoners of war in a camp on Java in 1942. And what puts him aside from the rest of the prisoners is that he was selected as a liaison between them and the guards, a translator and a sort of middleman between the two groups. And he has a very specific vision when it comes to surviving the ordeal. Be calm and quiet, don't rebel, don't try to escape, comply with the orders, and also try to find some understanding between the two cultures. He learns the language, but he's also making an effort to try to understand the Japanese customs. On the one hand, to get a better view of that himself, but on the other, so that through the relationships that he develops with the guards that he's building, he can better ensure the well-being and the good health of his comrades. But the relative calm of the situation is thrown into disarray one day as a new prisoner is moved to the camp. Selliers, played by David Bowie, who was sentenced to death, almost executed until saved at the very last moment by the camp supervisor Yonoi, played by Ryuichi Sakamoto. Yonoi sees something in Selliers, a steely, confident defiance, a certain dignity in the face of doom. He becomes fascinated by this and by the person himself. Perhaps he sees some semblance of the idealized Japanese samurai code somewhere deep inside of it, and he ends up taking Selliers to the camp. But Selliers is troublesome because of his constant acts of defiance, which crucially are also non-violent. He never really tries to initiate, a rebellion, an uprising, or anything like that. But he does have this quiet insistence on maintaining his pride and dignity, and that clashes with the attitude and with the treatment of guards towards some of the prisoners. And between these three characters, tensions begin to grow until inevitably they will boil over. So, the first thing that I like to really repeat is that despite appearances, this isn't really a war film. It's a drama, it's a character study, an exploration of these different outlooks on life and different ways of thinking and how they come clashing together. It also has undertones and themes of homosexuality, as well as kind of a regret for the actions of the past. I will say that the film is quite subtle in these regards, and I'm not sure I even correctly caught all of like the entirety of its message. And normally subtlety is very much appreciated, but in this case, I did wish that some of those themes were more developed or fleshed out to remove some of the ambiguity and ensure that the audience really understands what the movie is supposed to be about. The lead performances are pretty good, especially David Bowie, who, as usual, he has this air of weird mysticism around him, and he is quite magnetic indeed. I think he's the strongest part of the film, although there are some flashback sequences centering around him that they do add some important information and an additional layer to the character. But I did think there was a slight tonal mismatch between them and the rest of the film, and they did slow things down for a good moment. So that would be a sort of a criticism on my side. Other than that, though, I don't really see any major problems with the film. I think it's fairly decent at what it's trying to achieve, although due to its very nature as this very introspective, quiet and slow movie, it certainly won't be of interest to just about everybody, and definitely not to people who are seeking a more traditional war film.